Okay, so a few technical issues there, but hey, that's okay. We've just had a unofficial commercial break. So we can get back into it. And I think we were asking you, Tofilau, and I'm sorry that we got cut out while you were in the middle of that, but wanted to ask you, when you talked about that anxiety or being overwhelmed, what was it specifically? What was it, the fear or of perhaps getting the coronavirus, or just not wanting to leave your house?
I think that whilst New Zealand as a whole did a great job in terms of all the work and effort that had got into minimising risk, for me, in the back of my mind, I had this huge fear of a second wave coming and the impact of that being more devastating on New Zealand and even more so marginalised communities and our beloved Pacific community. So that's always in the back of my mind. And it doesn't help that I have OCD either.
Yeah. Those things combined wouldn't help at all. But what about you, Johnson? What did you find that was challenging?
You know what? I'm going to be honest with you. I loved it. I love lockdown, whether it be level 4, level 3, level 2. I really, really enjoyed it. One thing that I did find challenging, which I'm kind of fixing tomorrow, is that I really miss my family.
Yeah.
Yeah, and because I live in Wellington, booking flights to go home to Auckland, I really, really miss my family. But as you saw, that, man, the use of, Facebook Messenger, Instagram Messenger, and all the various different messaging platforms just skyrocketed, and I thought we really, really that people really engaged, maybe probably on a deeper level with their families, whether it be here in New Zealand, across the Pacific, or all across the world. And I really, really enjoyed that, and seeing other people share their own experiences of that as well. And we saw a lot of comedians come out on Facebook, on Instagram. We saw people kind of become really creative in their own bubbles. And I honestly, the only part I found challenging was missing my family.
Yeah. Me too. My mum lives in Hamilton, and so I found that very hard, not being able to go and visit her. But there was no way, she lives on her own, but there was no way I wanted to be the one that was responsible for giving her, coronavirus. So I was really happy to stay away, but was constantly in touch with her. You've mentioned about the comedians that we saw come out. Well, I think it was about 20 seconds or so that I saw on no, I'm only joking, Brian. I'm talking about.
Oh, sorry. Oh, okay.
Your 20 seconds. You were awesome in that, and just doing things. But you worked right through, right? You were working right through that whole time. How was it for you?
Yeah, a bit different again from Tofilau and Johnson, as you say, Sandra. I was working through the whole 7-8 weeks, and different in that, as a broadcaster, and pretty much having to, share information, key messages to our Pacific community. I didn't really have much time to dwell on the enormity of everything, because it was, every day, okay, what's happening? Let's get an update from Ministry of Health, or let's talk to someone, during their lockdown period. I was getting regular updates from some of the mayors from around the country and that. So for me, it was just the busyness of work and concentrating on my role in keeping our Pacific communities informed in that. So only time I'd really notice it was when I'd go home, and then, my wife and children interacting. And I think for me, that was the sort of challenging part, that unable to spend as much quality time as I would have liked, just for the fact of prepping, for work the next day. So that was, my situation.
Yeah, and thank you for doing that too, Brian, because the show has to keep going on, and just letting our people know, our communities, what they needed to know about the virus. So it was a really important job that you were doing. So thank you. I think you did a great job in that. I know that when I was doing a little bit of filming for Prepare Pacific, and it was about 2 days after we went into lockdown, and I was driving from Avondale to Manukau, and I honestly thought that I was on the set of Walking Dead, and I thought to myself, oh my gosh, is this what it would have been like driving down in a zombie apocalyptic, state, because there was just nobody around, and it was absolutely quite freaky.
It's funny you say that, Sandra, because pretty much, you know, when I'd be driving to work, yeah, not that there's many people on the road at 4:30 in the morning, but still, you know, usually when I'd go to work, pre-COVID-19, there'd be a few cars. But on the way to work, literally, I'd be the only car on the road. And then even after, you know, going home at about maybe 9, 10, 11 o'clock, you know, same thing. You'd be, you know, maybe 1 or 2 cars that I'd pass on the way home. And it'd be like, oh, my life, that's right, COVID-19.
Yeah. I mean,
I think one of the things that I shared this with you yesterday, Sandra, one of the things I loved about lockdown is I'm not like a greenie. I'm not a, but I really, really enjoyed the fact that it looked like nature had time to kind of breathe.
Yeah. And
nature had time to revive itself. You know, I saw videos of orca whales coming into Wellington Harbour. There's a whole lot of stingrays and a lot of fish going about, especially in a place where there's lots of boat traffic and lots of water traffic going on. I saw another video online of up in Okahu Bay. And, you know, along Okahu Bay up in Auckland, for those that aren't familiar, Okahu Bay, Mission Bay, you don't want to swim there. It's one of the, you know, it's like swimming at Mangere Bridge. And, you know, there's pretty much, you know, fish don't live there. But what we saw over the space of the last couple of weeks is that fish started to come and swim in the oceans. And just to share a quick story of some of my family back home in the Cooks, even they started to see, and I'm not sure, but they started to see just a plethora of fish coming about and swimming in the lagoons. And I just thought that was awesome.
That is so good, eh? Yeah, and I've heard lots of stories like that. I mean, and that was so enlightening around what had happened during the lockdown. What about for you, Tofilau? What was enlightening for you?
I think what was enlightening for me is that it was a reminder of yesteryear, when the pace wasn't so rushed, when, you know, shops weren't open on Saturdays and we didn't have the intensity of consumerism that we have now. And it took it back to a place where you got to spend quality time as opposed to just rushing and being so busy. And so it meant that you could have a reset in so many different areas of your life. And it made me think about how much of what I did pre-lockdown was actually non-essential.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I kind of felt like that too. And then I was, you know, starting to clean things. And I went, wow, do I really need all this stuff? You know, because you couldn't spend your money. You were like, do I really need to? I don't know. Did you guys find that?
Well, that's one thing I noticed too, of course, when we're talking about revived, my wallet was revived and my finances were revived. To be honest, the amount of money that I saved actually made me realize how much money I spend every week just going down the road, you know, like cafe and that, and it all adds up. And then it's like, oh my gosh, that's awesome. No more. And then when it hit alert level 3, who was waiting at the McDonald's drive-thru?
Were you the first one?
I was only waiting 2 hours before opening, but no.
I think I might have seen you on one of those photos that were going around. No, I'm just joking. What about you, Johnson?
Yeah, I would say, actually, I did save, but I was thinking, because I'm working from home, I think I need to treat myself. So I did buy a couple of things. But just seeing, you know, just kind of on the flip side, seeing businesses that had suffered. I was fortunate enough to put together a story for Tangata Pasifika talking to a number of businesses and a number of tradies that had returned back to work under alert level 3, and just seeing how they had struggled. They had one of the guys from the Hutt Valley area. He has a lawn mowing business, and he was talking about, you know, he went from mowing up to, you know, 20 to 25 lawns a day to absolutely nothing, and having to sit at home and, you know, worry about income. Thankfully, there is the wage subsidy, and that has been extended as well by the government. And for them, that was a lifesaver for them. And that really kind of brought me back to earth, where I'm like, here's me thinking about, I need to treat myself and buy something online when there's people out there that literally have actually lost their jobs. And there are businesses that have recovered, but unfortunately for many, and especially many of our people as well, there's jobs have been lost.
Yeah, that has been the heartbreaking thing. And we did a story on the Whono and their food distribution centre that they set up during this time, and I think they delivered well over 4,000 packages to families, right from Waiuku all the way up to Warkworth. And I think that was a heartbreaking thing, hearing the stories about families who really suffered, and families who hadn't been in this situation before and found themselves in this situation, and those who lost jobs during this time. Our hearts, go out to those who did lose their jobs. And it's been a really hard time. While for some who've been able to handle it, it's also been very hard for others. Have you found that through your own networks and family and friends?
Yeah. We have. So I don't know if you're asking me, but yeah, definitely. And it's heartbreaking, but also we do see a lot more people kind of reaching out their hands, and it's not a hand out, hand up. At times it has been a handout, but I do think people have been tapping into their networks. I even see people on Facebook, Twitter saying, hey, I'm looking for there's these jobs that are available, anybody keen, and people taking in their friends and family, which has always been the case, but even more so now. It is something that's been going on. So yeah, if you hear of any jobs going for people, then sing out.
Yeah.
I think that's the richness of community, though, because we've seen in the past, prior to this happening, people will say, oh, you have to take back your own destiny. You have to be the drivers of your own future. And so when the proverbial feces hit the fan, what you saw was those in community who really were connected, who really did serve, who really rose up as champions, and actually ended up showing those who are always in the limelight what works, where need is at its, and who the most vulnerable are. And they were the ones that actually directed, as opposed to the ones who were always in the background.
You would have seen a lot of that, Brian, with the show that people that you were interviewing.
It was incredible, during the last 7-8 weeks, time and time again, sharing stories of, individuals, organizations putting their hands up and really, serving the needs of the community, ahead of themselves. And it was great to see. Another thing, though, when the term, we've heard throughout this whole period, unprecedented, and with unprecedented time, there are things that people go through. And another thing that came up a lot was just around mental health, and how much COVID-19, job losses, businesses closing down, and how that impacted people's mental health was a real big issue.
Yeah, and domestic violence. We saw
unfortunately, yes.
With the increases in that, I think alcohol, the use of at that time, so lots of things that were impacting our families and our communities. And I suppose I want to lead into something around cultural practices during this time, and especially around the whole not hugging, kissing, greeting. The different ways, the old elbow, the sort of finger, and I don't know, but I was helping to deliver a package, and I went to a house, and I didn't realize that I knew the person at the house, and I said, oh, I'm here from the Course Collective, bringing this package, this is for you. And they went, Sandra, and I went, oh, I didn't know this was you. Next minute, they grabbed me and then gave me a hug and a kiss, and I was like, I didn't have time to really think about it. And afterwards, I was like, man, we're not supposed to be doing that, but it felt really uncomfortable to not do it. And I know that this has happened in a funeral, in that situation. How have you guys found that? How have you found it, Tofilau?
Well, I found it interesting because grief as one who suffers it or as one who comforts is interesting when the need to connect supersedes the need to protect. One goes with the best of intentions, but in cultural spaces especially, I've realized that I walk into them as me, and that is as a Samoan. And so I too need to understand the quandary and the peril whilst becoming accustomed to a new code of conduct. And so my words become the comforter, the connector, the driver, in which emotion is understood And the vā is neither denied nor simplified, but is intensified with alofa, ia mai tapua ingo no upo e lafo, you know? So whilst they can't do that, and I actually was pulled in, you know, whilst I can't do that of my own accord, I then use this to do that and everything else times 10.
It's quite tricky though. It's really tricky to navigate that, the VAR, and then just, you know, stopping yourself and then, or do, you know, do I not? Do I not? What about you, Mark?
Same thing. It's the hardest thing because, you know, as Pacifica, it's in our DNA. You meet someone, especially a family member, friend, it's straight into the hug, straight into. So for me to give like a fist pump or an elbow, it was, you know, it was so unusual. But just adding with regards to the you know, funerals and the new regulations during COVID-19, it just broke my heart, you know, hearing of so many, not just Pacifica, but people that were wanting to mourn, but not having the ability, and, you know, having to minimize maybe 1 or 2, I think at level 2, and then, you know, extending that bubble to about 10 people. But, you know, in a time of great grief, you want your family, you want your friends there, and they, you know, to support you, and not having the ability to do that and not to, you know, farewell properly, I think, you know, really impacted the grieving and mourning process for so many people, you know. And once again, unprecedented, you know. It's like, man, and this isn't happening globally, not just here in New Zealand, but same things are reverberating around the world, you know. It's, yeah, unbelievable.
I know that, you know, that navigating that space, but at that time in lockdown, when, you know, we were unsure about the spread of the virus and it was increasing, and then, you know, there was a question asked, you know, we have to really look at our culture and our practices, and is it serving us or is it, you know, hurting us in that space? And we're in a great position now because of great leadership in our country and going into lockdown. But is it time that we have to really ask ourselves, and for the short term, do we just leave the culture behind and adapt it so that we can move through these spaces? Or I suppose I'm asking is, do we really need to think about our mindset around these things? Because I don't think it's going to happen readily. What do you think, Johnson?
I think, oh, sorry, you go.
No, you go, Tofilau.
I think if anything, we need to really increase and intensify our knowledge of the core fundamentals of our culture, because indigeneity is the new currency. Yeah. And if we really understood it and we had loyalty to the cause as opposed to the individual, we would actually cut down on the variables, and the true pureness and the true essence of indigeneity would rise, and it would not leave anyone out.
Can you give me an example of what you mean by that?
Well, if we look at gatherings, you know, and if we understand the context of why we come together and what the purpose serves, then there's a clearness that comes with that. There's clarity. And a lot of the times things are misinterpreted because people don't have clarity. And then it's open slather for people to bastardize cultures or to be motivated by their own wants or needs. And the richness of what really is there is then lost. I might be waffling. I might pass it on because I think I'm waffling.
What about you, Johnson?
Yeah, I think maybe moving away from funerals and gatherings of such, one of the things I felt really bad about, but I had to shut down is in my own family. And, you know, as Pacific people, we be able to understand the connection between grandparents and grandchildren. And my parents really struggled with that, largely because they're used to constantly seeing their grandkids. They're used to seeing their grandkids on the weekend. And I think it was week 2 into level 4 lockdown. My parents were going to go and pick up the grandkids, and I had to say, no, you can't do that. And, you know, then comes the messages of guilt, and, you know, but I had to be like, no, you know, don't do that. You know, these are the rules. And I know that many people struggled with that. But you know, I'm going to say that I'm actually really proud of our people. I think on the whole part, I think our people really did stick to their guns, and I think they really did listen. For once, no, I really think they really did listen. Yeah, I guess people can argue that, you know, so and so didn't, but I think the rates of infection kind of prove that our people, you know, really did listen to these to the rules that were being put in place, and I definitely know it was hard. You know, we saw many people have to miss out on funerals. We saw people have to organize virtual funerals by going, you know, doing Zoom funerals, but I guess bigger picture, you know, if it's a matter of life and death, I'm really proud of our people during especially level 4 lockdown.
I'm proud of our people, but for want of not wanting to minimize what the other ethnicities went through, I was actually glad that the virus didn't originate in the Pacific, because then with community transmission, with culture, it could have been a completely different picture.
A bit different for me, because during lockdown, you know, for example, you all would have seen on reports about, you know, whaikawa clubs still operating, and many churches still gathering in garages. And for me, I would think, like, had the numbers of cases been higher amongst our Pasifika community, you know, how that would have impacted. And maybe, not saying that we were blasé, but because we had such low numbers, that for, you know, maybe that might have been the thinking amongst our Pacific community, oh, you know, we haven't got as many cases as, you know, the Pahalangis in there, we'll be fine, you know. So
yeah,
right.
But it was that attitude of apathy, if it was the other way around again, that it could have been a dangerous killer for our people.
Exactly.
and we just need to see what's happened in the States to know that this could have been so much worse. And, you know, I really take my hat off to Ministry of Health and the DHBs and the providers like South Seas, you know, and they set up the CBAC, the Community Testing Centre, Langimalia, you know, and also around Auckland, just to, you know, to be able to have that happen so quickly was fantastic, and also good for our people who embraced it. I think, you know, South Seas had one of the highest testing rates when they first opened, you know, so it was really good that, like you said, they embraced it and they did really well with it. Something that I'm interested to know is, are they going to embrace the government's contact tracing app that's out? I think there's about 200,000 now since it started yesterday. I've got to be honest, I am not on it, not yet, just because I haven't had time to. But are you on it, Tofilau? I'm
on it. I have two phones, my work phone and my personal. So on my personal one, it's my personal name. On my work phone, it's all my work stuff. But you know what? I've just created extra work because I still do both on both phones. So
no, it's just 199,998 because you're doubling up. What about you, Brian?
No, I'm not on the app yet, and I'm actually still waiting to hear back from Ministry of Health to interview someone. So yeah, if you're tuning in, please can you reply to my email? But yeah,
we can do your interview after this. And Johnson?
No, I'm not on the app, but a couple of us went out last night and went to the movies and whatnot. And you know, even if you can be on the app, I'm not saying don't download the app, but I didn't have the app when we went out. And so what you can do is you can just pull up the camera on your phone. You don't have, I don't think you had to have the QR code, but on most phones, if you just pull up the camera and scan it over the QR code, it'll bring up a website that you just click into and all the details will go there. So yeah.
Sorry, Johnson, can I ask, because I haven't been to the movies yet, what was it like going to the movies for the first time?
True.
Yeah, it was weird. So I mean, it was great. They had great hygiene practices, but once you get into the movies, they had asked everybody to sit, you know, leave a gap in between the seats. And so you might go with a group of you, like you might be in a bubble like you, Brian, a bubble of 12, and you will have to go, but everybody has to sit seats apart. And it was interesting. I mean, I don't want to dog on ethnicities and whatnot, but it was interesting turning around at one point and then noticing that, some people were just like, nah, stuff this, and they go and cram all together and sit all together. So it was an interesting experience, but it is what it is, right?
Yeah, it is what it is. But it's not good for dating, which kind of segues into the next part. When it comes to contact tracing, and no, I'm not, advertising for a date or anything, but when it comes to contact tracing, I know a big thing is around don't lie where you've been. Tell me where you've been and tell me who you've seen, which is really good, kind of logo for that. But I suppose when you're thinking around dating, housing, maybe going to places that you don't want anybody else to know that you're there and you won't give your details and all that. Do you think that's going to be an issue for our people? What do you think, Brian?
Oh, sorry, because there was a certain MP or minister that came to mind while you were talking. So when you're talking
and you get the details?
Around contact tracing. Sorry, and it's not to pick on any individual in particular. Sorry, Sandra, what was the question again, please?
I just wanted to know, when it comes to, where we've been, sometimes you might not tell your wife that you're going to the Kawa Club or the Kalapu, or you're on a dating app, and I don't know how that works now, swiping left or right or whatever, but even housing, or actually just even going for a holdout and having a feed. Tell me where you've been, tell me who you've seen, because we know that if somebody contracts the disease or the virus, they have to find out who you've been in touch with, who you've been in contact with, and then theirs, and the public health nurse will ring you around that. So what do you think around, do you think our people are going to embrace that?
They should, because it's vital. We don't want to see ourselves go from alert level 2 up, back to alert level 3 and alert level 4. But then going back to like the new app that's been released by the government, and a big issue that's coming up with other tracing apps released by other governments overseas, is the whole thing around privacy and what's going to be done with the information. Yeah. So on one hand, I'm all for it, because of course we don't want to see COVID spread. But then on the other hand, okay, I'm sharing my information. What's actually being done with that information? It's not going to be Analytica again or something like that.
Oh, okay. Johnson, not coming to you just because of dating or anything, but what do you think around this?
I think this is a perfect message for our people, that, like you said, just don't lie where you have been. And I know, I'm speaking from looking at my sister's Instagram stories and seeing that they've gone out to the drive-through, and I'm like, okay, so does the rest of the family know that you've been to the drive-through? Also, looking at dating apps, I know people that have, scrolled through the dating apps and whatnot, and then all of a sudden have gone to meet up for a date, and all of a sudden have pulled out, freaked out largely because they don't know where the other person has been. They don't know who the other person has been in contact with.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's not everybody, because, if we're looking at level 4 and 3, and especially those people that hadn't had that physical contact, and I'll leave that to your imagination, for a long time, sometimes people had to break that bubble.
Wow.
But it's on them. And I think it comes down to the fact that if you are one of those people, it's a perfect time to remind you that you need to be upfront and honest about where you have been, because
because you're putting people's lives at risk. I mean, we had a comment come through tonight just listening, and they've said, it's really hard with COVID because it makes us have to change our cultural practices, because that's how it spreads, right? But if we want to keep our elders safe during this time, what choice do we have? It is so hard. And it's exactly what you're talking about. If you don't tell people where you've been and you contracted the virus, you could put your grandparents, your parents, your young ones at risk here. And that's just, I don't know, I just wouldn't want to have that on my head. I don't know. Tofilau, what do you think?
See, that's an example of loyalty to the cause as opposed to loyalty to the individual. The need to make that connection at the expense of the virus coming to that person. And so for me, I don't have a problem with it. You know, I really don't have a problem with it. I think that for people who see other people, well, how many people are you seeing at any given time, for crying out loud?
Tofilau, if you're young and free and single, you are ready to mingle. I'm just saying, no judgment, no judgment.
And can I just add, guys, because when you've mentioned the word dating a number of times, in case my wife watches us back, I'm happily married and we're celebrating 25 years on the 2nd of December. So, yeah.
That's amazing.
I've got no issues because my wife looks at my phone more than I do, so she knows everything that happens on my phone. So, yeah.
And a locator that when you're going to your drive-through, she knows that you're there, anything. Another question came through. Do you think that Kava peeps or people will be contact tracing? Well, we saw what happened during lockdown. But they were having this, you know, some rogue clubs were having their sessions. I think if they were like in the bubble, it was disappointing to hear that, but I know there are other things. We can't just judge on one thing. There may have been a big bubble from what I understand. And also there was a lot of heat on Tongans. I don't think that it was just all Tongans who were doing this. You know, we know other cultures like their grog and that's as well. And so I think it was a little bit harsh for the Tongans, but what I was kind of disappointed was that they went and put it on Facebook that they were doing it. I was like, why would you do that?
You know, and I think that's a lesson in itself as well. I'm like, come on, people, don't be dumb. Why are you going to why record it? I mean, it's great for contact tracing because we'll be able to catch you. But
see, that's the other thing, eh? It's open to perception and interpretation, because there's nothing to say that you could have had 5 men drinking kava that all belong to one household who were in that bubble, because we all know that when men travel from the Pacific to come and work here, they don't always go and stay with family members. They might have one house that they all stay in. And sometimes when they put it on Facebook, they know that, but then they open up to everyone else, passing judgment, critiquing, and then like Chinese whispers, the story expands, and then you've got all of this happening all over the place, you know. So it's interesting, but yeah, don't put it on Facebook when it's open for interpretation, and the interpretation could be incorrect.
Yeah.
It's interesting too, because, you know, we're all in the media, you know, and if I start talking about the bigger picture of how our people are represented in the general media landscape, I'm sure that can be another Talanoa, but just, yeah, putting it out there.
I know, I agree with you. Guys, we're going to wrap it up. I could keep talking with you, maybe to get some dating advice from you, but I know it's coming to the end of this. It's been really awesome catching up with all of you and just hearing your thoughts. I mean, we're not saying we're cultural experts by any means or health experts, but you know, we've had our own experiences in the lockdown and in the life and levels. But just final thoughts, just as we wrap this up. And anything that you want to say about what we've discussed, or moving forward actually as we move hopefully to level 1. I know a lot of people say I can't wait to get back to normal. I don't know what normal will be like now. I think this is a new norm, and we need to think about that as we move forward. But Tofilau, your last thoughts.
Of course, a huge thank you for all of those, the essential workers, but for me personally, a huge thank you to our Pacific brothers and sisters who were out there. A huge thank you to our Pacific nurses and doctors and health professionals. A big thank you to our Pacific truck drivers, our Pacific orderlies, everyone. So all of our Pacific community who wake up and who go to work and who do everything to keep the economy of this country going, but for the most part are either ignored or are marginalized by perceptions. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Tofilau. I think that was well said. Brian.
Just to everyone, especially those that have lost their jobs, to those businesses that have closed, to those that have suffered during this unprecedented time of COVID-19. My heart goes out to you, but hope that tomorrow is another day and that another opportunity just to, you know, one foot in front of the other. I'm very fortunate and been so blessed, like, you know, others that, you know, I've still got a job. Praise God, you know, to be honest, and like, I'm so thankful that I've still got a job, and but yet for so many of us, you know, that's not the case. But just to encourage you, you know, that there's another day coming, and you'll get through this, you know, you got this. And of course, you know, with all your family and friends around you, you'll make it through. So God bless. Well said, Brian. And Johnson?
Yeah, I guess closing thoughts from me is that, you know, just to let everybody know that this page, Prepare Pacific, you know, we're in a space where there's so many mixed messages out there. There's so many conspiracy theories out there, you know, don't get me started on 5G. Yeah, so, you know, and there's so much fake news kind of circulating. And just to let everybody know that Prepare Pacific Facebook page, preparepacific.nz website is actually endorsed by our DHBs, by the Ministry of Health. So the information that is coming out through these social and digital platforms is actually, you know, things that have come from people leading the country's response in terms of health. So just to reiterate that the information we're trying to put out through this page and across the various different languages to try and cater to our people is something is not along the fake news lines, but it is something that it is a platform and it is a service that is here to assist and serve our people, and it's something that hasn't been done before, especially in the various different languages. So
yes.
You know, let your friends and family know about Prepare Pacific, because, you know, we're always going to be in a mode to prepare.
Yeah.
So this is something that will be around, and, you know, touch wood that nothing else has to come around again that we have to, you know, of this kind of size. But just know that in terms of health advice, that Prepare Pacific is purely catered for our Pacific people.
Thank you. Thank you, Tofilau. Thank you, Johnson. Thank you, Brian. I think it's been great Talanoa tonight. A lot of fun, and everything that you've said, I just really want to endorse and support, and to thank the, you know, Ministry of Health and the DHBs, including Waititi Mata. Got that one out just. And also that, you know, I think Jacinda puts it really well, you know, just got to be kind, look after each other, and also know that we just got to do our best because we've got this. So thank you, everybody, and look forward to the next one. Have a good night. Go well. Yay.